In 2012, Nokia released the 808 PureView, and the headlines were that it came with a massive 41 megapixel camera. Everyone else at the time was still hovering between 8 megapixels and 16, and so 41 was a lot of megapixels. And for a whole 3 years after it was released, it was simply the best camera in a phone, an absolute beast. But things have changed since then. Huawei is up to 50 megapixels, Samsung and Xiaomi are at 108, and there are rumors of a 200 megapixel camera in the works. But we have companies like Apple and Google who have the very best cameras in the industry but are still using 12 megapixel cameras, which begs the question. If a camera with 12 megapixels is doing a job as good as a camera with 100 plus megapixels, or even better, then what is the point of making a big deal about megapixels? So just a disclaimer, I'll be going into the weeds a bit on the technical bits behind what makes a good camera, but I promise I'll try my best to explain it as simply and clearly as possible. Let's start with what makes up an image. Think of an image as a page within a maths exercise book. Don't worry, we won't be doing any math right now. So, each box on this page is equivalent to a pixel, and we can color each box differently until a collection of all these boxes makes up an image. This is where the word megapixels comes from. Mega is a word describing 1 million, and so 1 megapixel is 1 million of these boxes on one page. In maths, it's the area that the image covers. Now that we all know what a pixel is and what a megapixel means, let's go a bit deeper. How does a pixel work? How do pixels produce the exact color at that part of an image? I remember in primary school we were taught that the primary colors are red, green, and blue. What I didn't know was why. Later on I understood that red, green, and blue are called primary colors because they are the colors that are used as building blocks for every other color. Lighter and darker shades of any of the three primary colors will make any shade of any color, as you can see here. The same is true for cameras. Each pixel is split into three, with each pixel creating a color on that part of the image by mixing different amounts of red, blue, and green. But this is just the surface of it, so we're going to go even deeper into how the actual sensor works. The camera sensor is also referred to as a CMOS sensor, and in its pure form it can only see images in grayscale. Basically what this means is that the color sees things in thousands or even millions of shades of gray, and not just the 50 that you are used to seeing in movies. For the picture to be turned into color, there is a color filter put on top of the sensor called a Bayer filter. This then maps the grayscale pic to the RGB filter, and you have some color, the same way you get them Snapchat and Insta filters. This filter and the CMOS sensor need to be carefully made so that they work together to recreate the best possible image. The filter needs to be able to map colors as accurately as possible and also allow as much light as possible through it for the CMOS sensor to get the clearest and most detailed image of whatever it is that it's looking at. Think of the CMOS sensor as your eye and the Bayer filter as some sunglasses. Good sunglasses are ones that make your eyes see clearly even when you're facing the direction of the sun. Bad ones, well, they just make everything look hazy or cloudy when the sun shines on it. The last piece of the puzzle which completes the picture, get it? Picture? Anyways, it is the ISP, or the image signal processor. It is a chip just dedicated to collecting information from the Bayer filter and the CMOS sensor and converting that information into an image that you can then see on the screen of your phone, tablet, laptop, TV, etc. It's also where camera engineers tune the look of the images the sensors capture. The ISP can be made so powerful to the point where properties of the CMOS sensor, like its physical size or the number of megapixels it has, won't really matter. That is how Google was able to use the same 12 megapixel sensor for 3 years in 3 different iterations of the Pixel smartphone and still take some of the best images in any phone day and night. They had a super powerful ISP that extracted a lot more performance out of the average hardware to produce spectacular images that were as good as or better than cameras with over 4 times the number of megapixels, and in some cases over twice the physical size. Side note, a physically bigger CMOS sensor means more area of the sensor that is available to capture more light. This means you can be a bit lazier with the ISP and leverage on great hardware for great photos. More light generally means better pictures in the age of today, as well as better low light performance. So, you can have a phone with 40, 64, 108 or even 200 megapixels in a camera, but if the quality of the CMOS sensor, the bare filter, the ISP is not up to scratch, all you'll have is a hot mess with plenty of megapixels. The best way to show you why megapixels are so useless now is how any camera from 40 megapixels and above never takes photos at its full resolution of 40 megapixels or whatever in auto mode. There is a technology called pixel binning where multiple pixels are combined into one. So for example, my Huawei P30 Pro will take 10 megapixel photos when it's in auto mode even though the main camera is 40 megapixels. It is grouping 4 pixels on the main sensor into one so that each pixel in this 10 megapixel photo has 4 times the information than if I were to take a pic at the full fat 40 megapixels. It's a compromise manufacturers are now making where they put less resources in the image processing in favor of the hardware because the hardware is easier to work with than software. So your 48 megapixel camera is probably taking 12 megapixels photos most of the time. Your 64 megapixel camera is taking 16 megapixel photos and so forth. And because companies like Apple and Google prefer letting the ISP do most of the heavy lifting, they will start with average hardware spec-wise compared to competing brands, but go full nerd with the image processing software to make their photos amazing. Or in other words, they don't fuss about having the most megapixels but still take photos that are as good as or better than everyone else. So next time when you go on buying a phone for its camera, try taking a couple of photos with it and see how it does. Don't just buy it because it has the most megapixels or the most number of cameras. Those numbers don't mean much these days. Thanks for watching.